Welcome to Thinking Deeper by 6-7.
We have an absolutely wild one for you today.
Oh, we really do. We are exploring a fascinating clash of worldviews from a YouTube channel called Capturing Christianity. And we are basically taking you on a journey from the deep weeds of biochemistry, like how life could possibly spring from non-living chemicals straight into this profound philosophical territory.
Right, we're talking atheism, theism, the very existence of God. It covers so much ground.
It really does. But, before we get too deep into the science and the theology, I think we need to set some ground rules for this deep dive.
Yeah, that's crucial. So just as an impartiality disclaimer for you listening, because the source material heavily features intense debates around atheism and a creator, we need to emphasize that we are not taking any sides here.
Exactly. Not at all.
Right. We are not endorsing the viewpoints of the original speakers. Our mission is purely to neutrally purport and analyze the incredibly thought-provoking arguments contained in the source material.
We're just your guides through this intellectual maze. And hey, speaking of guides, if you like my channel, please subscribe and press the like button.
Always a good reminder.
Yeah. So let's just jump right in. We're starting with this caller, an agnostic, who brings a highly technical, really scientific challenge to a prominent scientist named Sy Garte.
And the caller's main argument is that Darwinian evolution, like the actual mechanics of it, does not need a genetic code or ribosomes to function.
Wait, ribosomes, remind me, those are the protein factors, right?
Exactly, the little biological machines inside cells. The caller's saying you don't need those for evolution to start.
Okay, let's unpack this, because that sounds almost impossible at first glance.
It does, yeah.
It's like saying a car engine somehow evolved and improved itself before the factory to build the car was even invented.
That's a perfect way to look at it. And what's fascinating here is the caller's core strategy. He's not just throwing out theories. He's trying to prove that if you have chemical networks that can self-replicate with variation, then natural selection can take over way before what we strictly call life begins.
Right, and he brings the receipts, too. He cites this paper in the journal Life by Sandeep and Shashi is the senior author, I think.
Yeah, that's the one. It's all about self-reproduction and autocatalytic chemical reaction systems.
Which is a huge mouthful. But basically, reactions that fuel themselves, and he specifically brings up amyloids.
Oh, the amyloids. This part is crazy.
It is. He points out that amyloids, these sturdy protein structures, can form spontaneously in volcanic gases.
Just like in the raw chaos of prehistoric Earth.
Exactly. And they create these stable macromolecules that don't even degrade in water. They just persist.
And then he layers on top of that Cronin and Miris's work on molybdenum.
Which is completely inorganic, right? It's a metal.
Right. He's showing that the prerequisites for Darwinian evolution, heredity, variation, self-replication, can happen even in totally inorganic systems.
So he's really building this robust case that chemical evolution is entirely possible without a creator stepping in to, magically spark life.
Exactly. But here is where Sy Garte steps in and pushes back.
Yeah, and Garte is not some lightweight. He knows his stuff.
Oh, absolutely. Garte is familiar with all these models. He knows about Nick Lane's models, the amyloid research, all of it. But he insists they don't solve how life actually started on Earth.
Why not, though, if the chemistry works in the lab?
Well, he cites his own paper in Biosystems, and he heavily relies on Manfred Eigen's discovery of something called the error threshold.
Okay, the error threshold. This is vital.
It really is. Garte argues that for evolution to even get started, the accuracy of self-replication must cross a mathematical threshold. It has to be close to 50%, not 0.
Right, because if you're making a copy of a copy of a copy and your error rate is too high, the whole thing just dissolves into garbage.
Exactly. He draws a massive line between inorganic chemistry evolution and biological evolution, which he says has a highly specific, mathematically bound mechanism. Without that 50% accuracy, genetic information degrades faster than it builds.
Here's where it gets really interesting, though, because, if you're listening to this, you have to wonder, if we already see interactions between nucleic acids and amyloids in these chemical models, aren't scientists just one step away from crossing that 50% threshold?
That is the big question.
Like, is Garte just moving the goalposts here?
It's a totally valid pushback. But to be fair to Garte, he's just adhering strictly to the math. He isn't dismissing the brilliance of the chemistry the caller brought up.
Right, he admits the chemistry is clever.
Yeah, but he's arguing that the real-world mathematical limits are a hard barrier. You need that minimum accuracy, or the biological information just falls apart in the wild.
Which naturally forces this entire conversation out of the chemistry lab and straight into philosophy.
Oh yeah, the leap is immediate.
Because if they can't agree on the science of abiogenesis, it becomes a question of what we do with that unknown space. And the caller poses this brilliant question.
The quantum gravity comparison.
Yes. He says, look, we don't have a consensus theory for quantum gravity either, but physicists don't just throw their hands up and say, God did it.
Right.
So he asked Garte, why does the lack of consensus on the origin of life automatically point to God for you?
It's the classic God of the Gaps challenge.
Exactly. And Garte's response is honestly not what I expected at all.
It's so surprising. He actually agrees with the caller.
Yeah. Garte flat out rejects the God of the Gaps argument. He says, as a scientist, he firmly believes an actual physical naturalistic theory for the origin of life does exist.
And that we will eventually find it.
So what does this all mean? I mean, think about how rare it is to hear a theist in a debate explicitly reject the God of the Gaps argument while still holding on to their faith.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, it shows how Garte separates his scientific expectations from his theological beliefs.
Right, because he says his belief in a creator is a matter of faith, not science.
Exactly. He believes God created everything, including quantum theory, which he views as deeply mysterious and almost divine in its complexity.
While the caller, on the other hand, represents the strict, empirical, atheistic viewpoint where you demand evidence over any kind of intuition.
But the real twist is Garte's prediction about the future.
Oh, man. Yes. The hints.
Right. Crucially, Garte predicts that when scientists finally do discover the purely naturalistic theory for the origin of life, it will actually contain hints pointing toward a creator.
It's such a wild reframing of the whole debate. He's not afraid of the scientific discovery. He thinks the discovery will validate his faith.
Exactly. It's a really unique perspective.
But, having explored this intense, high-level debate, we kind of need to step back and look at the meta layer of all this.
The platform itself.
Yeah, capturing Christianity. Because it's an oasis in the vast swamp of YouTube, honestly.
It really is. And the host of the channel reveals some pretty heavy behind-the-scenes stuff during this.
Yeah, they are facing a severe deficit. They'll run out of money in basically 5 months.
Which is terrifying for an independent channel. But this raises an important question about how we value discourse because of what the agnostic caller did next.
This is my favorite part of the whole thing. The agnostic caller actually donated to the channel in 60 seconds from backstage.
Right after devoting them.
Right, because he says he relies on the channel to keep his iron sharp.
Iron sharpens iron. It's such a powerful concept.
It's incredible. People who vehemently disagree financially supporting each other just to keep good, honest arguments alive.
It proves the channel's mission, really. Prioritizing intellectual charity and fair-mindedness over these ideological echo chambers we see everywhere else.
Yeah, they promote steel manning instead of straw manning.
Presenting the opponent's argument in its absolute strongest form.
Exactly. It's so rare. And to keep the lights on, they're running this fundraising drive with some really specific donor gifts.
Oh, yeah. Like, everyone who donates gets a PDF of a gospel reliability article.
And if you do $25 a month, you get Pat Flynn's book, The Best Argument from God.
And the top tier is wild. For $50 a month, donors get a bronze and iron sculpture of Jesus based on the Shroud of Turin.
Which is so unique, and people can find that via their Patreon or donor box.
It just shows how dedicated this community is to keeping real debate alive.
It really does. Well, we have covered so much ground today. From the deep weeds of amyloid chemistry and volcanic gases to Manfred Eigen's error threshold.
And that 50% accuracy limit.
Right. All the way up to this profound philosophical clash over a creator and the sheer value of civil discourse.
That's been quite the journey.
It has. But before we go, we want to leave you with a final thought to ponder on your own. Something that builds directly on Sy Garte's final prediction.
About the hints in the math.
Exactly. If scientists do eventually uncover a purely naturalistic mathematical formula that perfectly explains how non-living chemicals sparked into life, what exactly would a hint of a creator inside that formula look like?
That's a huge question.
Can an equation ever truly bridge the gap between empirical science and theology? Or is beauty and divine design just in the eye of the beholder?
Something to really think about.
Definitely. Keep questioning, keep exploring everything we talked about today. Thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive.